So in this tutorial we're going to be learning how to sculpt a tombstone, so as part of the introduction to Zbrush. So the first time we've opened it, we're presented with this light box. We're not going to use that in this session, so I'm just going to click on light box up here and that'll hide that window. What I want to do is just bring in a base mesh. So if I click over here on any of these tools, it'll bring up this catalogue of objects that I can access. So the object that I want is the cylinder 3D. So if I scroll over and click on cylinder 3D, that's going to allow me to draw one into the screen. So if I left mouse click drag, I can drag a mesh into the scene. I then want to hit edit, and that will allow me to click in the empty space to rotate around the object or orbit the object. If I didn't press edit, I would end up drawing tons and tons of meshes, so using it essentially in 2D, and I have to press Control N to get rid of them. But if I draw one, press T to edit, I can go in and then start to edit this mesh. So because I used a base shape from inside of Zbrush, I have this initialize option down here in this tool menu. And this will allow me to change some of its default attributes. So I'm going to hit Align Z to put it on its side. I'm going to turn on Poly F down here, and that's going to show me the edges. But I want to also adjust the amount of edges. So if I drag down on this 17 in the V divide, and probably drag down to 6 to get a few less edges on the top, I'll drag along the Z size, and that way it'll be a bit thinner. More like that, it's fine. And I'm going to have a few more edges going around it. So currently it's on 32, but if I drag on that, or maybe I'll just type in 100, then I've got exactly 100 edges going around the model, and that's kind of smoothed it out a little bit as well. So before I can start to sculpt on this shape, I need to make it a 3D mesh. So it's not a 3D mesh at the moment, it's one of these 3D, well, it's not a poly mesh at the moment, we need to make it a poly mesh. It's currently a 3D mesh, I guess, and then we hit make poly mesh 3D, and that will actually make it a sculptable mesh. So I want to be able to kind of mask the top half and pull the bottom half down. So to use a mask, if I hold down Control, you'll see mask appears. I can then left mouse click outside in the empty space and draw a big rectangle over exactly half of the model. So I'll catch the top half. I can then press W on my keyboard to go to the move tool and then move that down. And then if I drag on that little green cube, I can flatten out the bottom. So I've already started to make this shape. So we're just trying to match probably the contours around here, just getting the circular bit right to the length of the bottom half. So that's about right. So just in terms of navigation, all I'm doing is left mouse dragging in this empty space, or I can hold down Alt, left mouse drag, or I can hold down Control and right mouse drag to zoom in and out. When I'm rotating, I press Shift, and that snaps me into different views, which is useful because often you're going to want to use the same view. Cool, and that's rotating around. F will just frame the object. Cool. So what I want to do next is probably redraw the edge flow a little bit, just to make it so it's running around the mesh rather than all these triangles. Triangles aren't really great inside of Zbrush. So to do that, I'm going to start by setting the polygroups. So polygroups are ways of breaking up your model but without actually splitting it apart. So I'll show you what I mean by if I go to the polygroups menu on the right, and if I was to hold down Control and just draw a little square somewhere and then hit Group Mask, it ends up making Group Mask. It ends up making that a different polygroup. So it hasn't split the model, it's just made it look different. You'll only see that under Poly F. So if I turn off the mask, you'll see that it's polygrouped that section. The things I can do to a polygroup are like if I hold Control and Shift in draw mode and click on it, I can kind of isolate that section. The rest of it still exists. I just hold Control Shift and press on a polygroup to isolate it in an empty space to bring the rest of the model back. So I want to be able to kind of polygroup it so I can add divisions. So inside of Zbrush, generally you work with lots of polygons, and that allows you to get high detail. Currently we have 402 total points, and you can see that in the top right. We want to get that up to the millions really eventually to be able to get some high resolution detail. But if I just hit Control D or go to geometry and hit divide, you'll see I can start adding those divisions. That number's going up. It's at 7,500. Hit again, 28,000, 115,000. So very quickly you can end up with millions inside of Zbrush. But it's made a bit of a mess. It didn't like the triangles. They all kind of pinched. It kind of beveled the edge a little bit more than I wanted it to be. So it's starting to feel like a bit of a pillow. So I'm going to undo those divisions. So Control Z a bunch of times. Cool, that'll get us back to where we were before. What I want to do is kind of crease these edges initially so I can add divisions without it pinching. To do that, I'm going to go to my polygroups down here and go to groups by normals, and that's going to kind of group based on the angle between this face and this face. So currently it's set to 45 degrees. If anything goes 45 degrees to go around a corner, it's going to change it into a different polygroup, and that's what it's done here. So every face has its own polygroup. I can, from this point, just go to geometry, crease, and crease PG. So that's going to crease all the polygroups along the border. So if I look at the border now, we should have kind of a double line there, which represents it being creased. Now if I divide it, so I hit divide a bunch of times, it's no longer making that weird star shape. It's maintaining those edges. It is still making a bit of a mess of the edge flow, but it's not making a mess of the model. I kind of want to fix that edge flow a little bit to get a cleaner topology. So a really cool feature inside of Zbrush is we can use something called Z-Remesher, and that's going to kind of redraw our edge flow better than what we've got. I might drag that back down to 4, so I can go up and down in my subdivision levels. I want to be at 4. I'm going to del higher, so delete the higher one, and I'll leave it at 4, so 28,000. Then I'm going to go to Z-Remesh, which is a little lower down the stack. And instead of going to a target polygon, I'm going to hit same. So it's going to remesh it to 28,000 again. I'm going to hit keep groups, and that way it's going to keep my polygroups. So remember where the edges are, and do it. And then I'm going to hit Z-Remesher. So make sure your model isn't higher than this when you hit Z-Remesher, because it's quite a big calculation to redraw all of the edges for us based on this existing shape. So I'm going to hit that button, and an orange bar will appear, and it'll probably take a little while. Cool, you can see it's still thinking about it, and it's got there. But it took a little while. That was for 26,000, so trying to do that on millions will cripple your machine, essentially. But this hasn't done a bad job. It's got nice edge flow. It's a bit pinchy in the middle, but I'm not too worried about that. I really just wanted to keep nice, clean outer edges. So let's continue to try and develop this shape. So at the moment, it could be pinched across a little better at the top here, and we can do that by, let me turn off that poly F, turn on our move. What we can do is we can kind of mirror the object from right to left. So if I go to, in my geometry tab, I have modify topology. In there I have this option to mirror and world. If I was to click on that, it would do absolutely nothing. So, well, it did do something, but you wouldn't have seen it. It mirrored this side over the top of the existing side. But if I was to move the model away from its center pivot, so to the left a little bit, and then hit mirror and world, you'll see the little mirror, but it would do it based on this new pivot point, thus giving us this pinch point at the top, which is what we wanted. I'm just going to undo that and move it just a little bit more, and then do it, and that looks like a good shape now, a bit closer to our reference with that pinch in the middle at the top. And if I turn on my poly F, you can see it's kind of messed up our edge flow again, but it's given us a better shape. So I'm going to Z-Remesh it again, still at 22,000 this time, so it should be even quicker to calculate. I'll use the same settings, so still on same, still on keep groups, and hit Z-Remesh. And there we go, we've kind of drawn that again, but based on having that pinch at the top. Cool, it's kind of tried to curve it a little bit, but that's fine. I mean, I'm going to give it quite a lot of rock damage and things anyway as we develop it, so I'm not worried about maintaining perfect edges. If I was making a mech character or some kind of engine or aeroplane or something, I might want to keep very clean edges, but for rock, I'm just going to weather it quite a bit. So next thing I want to do is try and capture this inner cut. So to do that, I'm just going to duplicate this mesh. So if I go to my subtool and hit duplicate, I've then got two meshes. So here's another one that I just duplicated. And I want to subtract this one from this one. But first, I want to scale it slightly differently. So I'm going to scale it in a bit across here. You see that my pivot point's slightly off now from where we played around with it. So if I want to center me pivot again, I'll just hit the home button and go to this one and hit the home button on that as well. And let's just put both of our models back in the middle of the world. So I'm going to move this and scale it in a bit. Oh, yeah, hit this one and that'll center the pivot again on the selection. So this one will bring the mesh to the middle of the world, and this one will bring the pivot to the middle of the object. There are a few different ways of moving the pivot point around, mostly holding control and moving it about. But there are other ways which I'll show you as we go through the session. Scale it in just a little bit more. Cool. That looks pretty good. The edge looks fairly even. Maybe I'll make it a little less. But I do want to extend this bottom bit. So if I hold down Control and draw a big square, maybe a bit bigger than that, and then just pull down that bottom bit, I might soften that mask. So go to Masking on the right hand side, and you can hit Blur Mask, and that's just going to blur that, giving it a bit of a softer fall off. And then I'm just going to pull it down a little bit. Well, it doesn't even need to be that much, just enough to get it past the bottom. Cool. You can remove a mask by holding down Control and drawing in an empty space. I'm then going to turn on this Trans button, and that's going to make the other object transparent so I can see a little better how much I'm intersecting. So I want this one to kind of be cut away from this one. And to do that, I need to go to my subtool palette. I'm going to turn off this Trans. So to subtract one mesh from the other, you have to subtract from the top mesh to the bottom. So if I click on the top one, which was our original mesh, I'll click on Live Boolean, and that's going to allow me to subtract another mesh. And I'm going to click on this little button here, and that's going to set it to subtract. This will set it to add or subtract, and this one's cutting in, and you can see that on the mesh that this other shape is now cutting from that shape. So this is really useful to just cut shapes from other shapes and create patterns and things like that on your models. In this case, we've just cut it in to the inside. I'll make it about that deep. About that deep. Little less, maybe that. Yep, that's cool. And then once you've set where you want your objects, so I can continue to move it up until the point that I say go to this menu where it says Boolean and hit Make Boolean Mesh. And that's just created a new mesh. We can see it in this stack now, and it's called UMesh. So the one we're working on is this one. It has two in the corner, so I know it's got two different models, like two subtools. This one has only one. So if I hit on this UMesh, it goes to this new mesh, which is just this one subtracted from this one. That's the result of the Boolean. Cool, so other things I want to add, maybe we'll try and add the cross next. So to do that, I'm going to bring in a cube. So if I go to Append down here, so inside my subtool menu, just hit Append and grab the cube 3D, and that's going to bring a cube in. If I want to select the cube in the viewport, just hold down Alt and click on it, and it will select it. Press W, move it up, and we can scale it down and try and match what we have in our reference. So I'll just do them one by one, like do the vertical cross part, and then I'll just duplicate it to do the bottom half. So move that up. and then get it to intersect. So I don't want it to come out too far, just a little bit like that, maybe a tad taller. Then I can duplicate that mesh, so just hit duplicate and rotate. If I hold down shift, it will kind of snap. Scale that in and move it up. And there we kind of have our cross, more or less, and a good depth. So I'm going to merge those two meshes together. So the best way to merge inside of, like merge meshes in Zbrush, is to merge down in the stack. So you can move things up and down in the subtool stack using this button. So that will click it, it will go up or back down. But I always want to be merging down, so I want to be merging this one onto this one. So I've selected the one above, go to merge, and merge down. Hit OK, that's OK. So they're not undoable things. When you merge two things together, don't press Ctrl-Z after, because it will just corrupt the mesh. There was other ways of splitting them apart again, but that wouldn't be one of them. So when you merge things together, do not immediately try and undo it after. Cool. So next we probably want some text. So we need to create some text from here, and then probably cut it away from this mesh. I feel like my cross has come out pretty big. I'm just going to scale that right down and move it up. That's a little bit closer to the reference. Cool. Next I'm going to create some text. So I'm going to go to my Z plugin at the top. So just in this menu, you're going to find text, 3D, and vector shapes. I click on that. And in here we can just hit new text. So we're just going to write some stuff to go onto our gravestone. So we're going to say goodbye to our GA5001. So GA5001. Oops, a few too many zeros. Let's say in the memory of, and we put some dates on there. I'm going to double space between my text because I'm going to need to split this up later on. You can't actually write in paragraphs in you can't end a sentence essentially inside of this window, because if I hit return it will make the text. So I'm going to write out the whole sentence and then we're going to split it up in the viewport, which will make sense in a minute. So far I've got GA5001 in the memory of, let's give it some date, so 1802. It wants to be quite old because, like I said, I'm going to weather this thing to 1874. That'll do. And then we just need to bite a bunch of random text, really. So all work and no. So you can write anything you want, really, for a long period of, like for a few sentences, really. The reason I'm just writing any old thing is because if I look at my reference, the text is so worn away that you can't even read it anymore, but you can kind of tell that there's some there, so I'm just quite happy to write any old thing, preferably not with loads of spelling mistakes, but cool, that'll do. So that's quite a long sentence, and then I'm just going to hit, go to the end and hit return. And what that's done is created a long string of text here, which has appeared this side. Now, it looks like I've got my model the wrong way around. So that's a good way to check to see if you've made your model backwards. I'm just going to rotate my model as opposed to rotating the text because I know I've kind of put them in the wrong place. So I'm going to merge this one down to the cross. So I just hit merge down with the box selected. So the cross and the tombstone are all one thing, and I'm going to rotate it 9 degrees. So just hit rotate. If I hold down shift, I should be able to get it to 180. There we are, minus 100. Oh, not quite. Minus. We'll just go 80 degrees. That's fine. Cool. So that's facing the right direction. I want to kind of shrink this text to fit my object. So I'm going to click on the text and scale that right down. The font isn't really ideal for what I'm doing. So we can change the font by going back to our Z plugin menu. If I click on this radial button up here, it'll dock the menu in the side, and that'll save me having to keep going in. The same as this menu, the tool menu we've been using. It's also up here. If I click on it, I can dock it over there. So this is just how you can dock windows around the place inside of ZBrush. So under here, I want to change this font. So probably, I think there's like an old English or something like that. Oh, so there's quite a few different fonts you can choose from, as you can see. English old, Edwardian. I mean, Edwardian's probably quite interesting for this. Oh, comes out a little big. Actually, I think it just resets the size, so we might have to change the size as well. But let's find old English, something like that. There we are, old English text. That's fine. That looks a little closer to what's in our reference. So again, I can just I can actually bevel the edges as well, which might add to the look. So if I drag on there, probably not as big as that, maybe like a 6, that'll be fine. And then I can drag it down, and we'll scale it back to a more appropriate size. I'll just hit frame so I can do it a lot bigger. Kind of want my window back, so if I go into this menu and click here, that will redock that where it belongs, and double click on here, these little arrows, and that will minimize that section again. Let's zoom in and scale this right down, and then zoom in. Okay, that's a better size, but I just want to break up the parts. So to do that, if I just hold down Control and draw a square over the GA5001, once I've got that masked, I can invert my mask. To invert a mask, just hold down Control, Alt, and click in an empty space. Then it's inverted. I can then hold down Alt, move the pivot over there, and start to position this where I want it. It'd be a good idea to move them all at the same time forward. So I'll remove the mask. So to get rid of the mask, hold down Control, just draw a little square, an empty space. Move this across. It's going to zoom in. Might want this text a little fatter, so I'm just going to scale it to the side and position it so it's just cutting into the shape. I don't want to cut in too deep, but a little bit, something like that. It should be fine. It's not exactly in the center, so let's move that a tad. And I'm just going to mask it again. Invert the mask and scale it. Let's have more. Cool, probably around there, looks fine. Let's grab some more of this text. So get rid of the mask, mask in the memory of, invert the mask, move the pivot, and then position it underneath there. Cool. Double check that that's intersecting with the model, that's fine. Then I'm going to mask the date, invert it, move the pivot, and position this somewhere useful. Scale the date up quite a bit. I might even stretch it up a little bit as well to give it a bit more shape. Something like that. That's good. And then we've got to take the rest of this text from here. So let's get rid of that mask, add a new mask. Maybe over there. Just move the pivot point a bit closer. oops. Let's just mask from here, so across to that bit of text there. Invert that selection and move it down. And we're just going to try and position these into something that works a little better as a sentence. Something like that. Oh, not a particularly long sentence. Like I said, it doesn't need to make any sense, so I might just steal that off the end and stick that over here just to even out that row of text. And I can probably duplicate this lot to have it twice because I want it to be a little bit longer than what it is at the moment. Maybe I'll move that lot down. Then I'll just select it all, turn on my poly F, and I kind of want to polygroup what I've got masked. So if I want to do that, I can press Control and W, and that will polygroup anything that I have masked at that time. So all it's done is polygroup that bit of text at the top. And you can see this one's pink and this one's blue. I can split them by going to Split and Group Split. Yeah, okay. And now that's two objects. So this text is one object, this bit's another. I can then go to move that. So I'll just add, move, let me see. See where the pivot point's gone? It's down here. So I might just hit the center to the object button and then move that text down to here. Press F and I can frame it. Let's see now a little bit. I might scale it down and duplicate it. So let's maybe move it across a little bit. And then duplicate that. So I hit duplicate, move it down again. And now we have a decent amount of text on our tombstone. So I want to merge all of these texts back together again so they're all one thing. I can do that by just selecting the top one in my stack. If you want to see more in the stack, we can drag this visible count up, and that's going to allow us to see a few more of our meshes. You can see I've ended up with a few bonus pieces here that I wasn't expecting. Hopefully that's not made a mess. Let's merge it all together and see what happens. So merging from the top down, I'm going to merge everything into one object. So I'm going to merge down, always okay, and then just keep hitting merge down till all of that text is one object. So now you can see I've got two subtools. If I drag that down, just the tombstone and the text. I want to kind of add this bottom chunk as well. So to add that bit, I'm going to append another cube. So go to your append on the subtool and hit cube. And I'm just going to move it across because I've moved some things off the center of the world. So I should really set them back. There we go. Let's pop that here and just get it to fit properly. So you see these little eyes at the end of the subtool, they allow you to hide and reveal things that you might not want to see. So be aware of that. If you think a mesh has gone missing, it might have just turned off the eye up there. So I'm going to scale this across and make it thin. I don't need to get it perfect, but better to have it bigger than it is small, because I'm just going to trim the sides off after I've done it. So I'll zoom that up, scale that down a bit more. And that ought to do it. Maybe bring it over a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfectly even because this thing's quite weathered, so close enough is going to be good enough. What I do need to do is kind of chop these corners off, so I'm going to need a few more subdivisions on this. So to do that, we'll do as we did before. We went to polygroups, group by normals. That will polygroup each of the faces. Go to geometry, hit crease, crease PG, then divide, and that's high poly enough. And after I've done that, I kind of want to cut these edges off because you can see they kind of slant down on our reference. So if I need to cut away mesh, I can just hold down Control and Shift, and that's going to change our button up here. So by default, we'll get our brush, whatever brush we're using. If I hold down Control, I'll get my mask. And if I hold down Control and Shift, I'll get this menu. And this allows us to kind of cut up meshes. So we're going to use this one, the Clip Curve. And the way it works, so I'm holding down Control and Shift. I've got my Clip Curve selected. I can just drag, left mouse drag, and I'll get this little line come off. So the gradient, the little dark area, is what's going to get cut. So if I hover over here, I'll just let go of Shift and that will stop it from snapping. So all I've got is Control now. And I'll hold down Space and that will move my cutter around. I just want to position it so it's going to trim over there. So I might be better off zooming in a little just to be a bit more accurate. And I can also cut this bit and this bit at the same time. So if I hold down Control and Shift, go to Transform, turn on Active Symmetry, I can then cut over this side there. So just position it better using Space like that. Yeah. Or maybe the symmetry is slightly off, just from where I've been moving things around. So not to worry, we can cut them both separately. It would have been possible. I just need to move my model back to the center of the world, which I will do once I've cut this other side. Cool. So that's that side cut and this side cut, and they're more or less even. Maybe I could have done that a bit shallower. Right there. It feels a little bit longer over here, so I'm going to trim the whole edge. And that looks a little better. Let's try that cut one more time. Oops. So I'm going to undo that trim and just cut it from there to there. So I'm just Control-Zing occasionally. It's worth doing properly, even if you have to fidget a little bit. That's fine. I'll just scale this across a little bit as well. And I will trim that edge off. What I could do, if you're really still want to just get it mirrored, which I do now, I'm not happy that these two are uneven, I'll just go to my Modify Topology and Mirror and World and delete the lower first. So delete the subdivisions, hit Mirror and World, and that kind of did it in the opposite direction that I want. Actually, it's fine. So just Mirror and World. And at least they're both the same. And then I'll just scale it back out. Okay, that'll do. And that'll be the extra shape that we merged to this top half, which we'll do next. So go to Subtool. I want to move it up in the stack, so I'll hit this one, and I'll move it up. And then I want to merge this one down, so merge down. And now all of that is one object except the text. I then want to trim those edges so it's all flat. So I can do that by going to a side view, using my clip curve again, so Control Shift. I'm just going to cut a very thin line off the front here, like that. You can see that's cut straight all the way down. I'll do the same on the back, but starting with the opposite end. And that's trimmed that bit flat, so now if I turn that off, you can't see any transition from the top to the bottom, which is what I wanted. I can now Dynamesh this. So Dynamesh is something we haven't looked at, and that's how I can fuse this all into one shell as opposed to lots of separate polygroups. It'll also make the cross part of the same object as well. So if I go to Geometry and Dynamesh, and I will change this resolution. So the resolution is the resulting amount of polygons. So if I go to, let's say, 600 and hit Dynamesh, this will take a little bit of time to think about, but what it's going to do is redraw the edge flow again, but merge it all into one shape. So what it's done is it's made it into 1.1 million polygons, which is quite a lot, but it's made it all one shell, which has merged the bottom to it as well. It currently looks a little separate because they're different polygroups, but if I go to my polygroups, I could get it to regroup based on the edge direction, but there's quite a few edges, so that's a bit of a big calculation, so I'm not going to do that. I will just leave it as it is, and I will subtract this text from the rest of the shape, but I still feel like it's a little bit fat overall, so I might make it a little bit thinner first. Scale the whole object in. That looks a bit better. It's hard to do proportions in this view because we're kind of looking in a orthographic view. I'm not sure what's quite happened up here. I think that's just where I'm running Camtasia at the same time. It's making my buttons look a little glitchy. But what I want to do is change it to perspective. So if I hit here, that'll kind of change the look. But we tend to always look at things in perspective because our eyes obviously have perspective on them, so they can look a bit more like your reference, especially when doing things like characters. You want to be working in a perspective mode. It's difficult to do some things in perspective if you want to make straight cuts. Better to do that in kind of an orthographic view, but perspective is fine for this. And so now I've got this shape. The next thing I want to do is, well, I would usually maybe cut this from this to get our text on there, but I'm going to show a different way of putting the text on, and that's to use a alpha. So if I want to generate an alpha from this, I can click on solo down here with the text selected, so that will solo just the text in the screen. I'll press frame and I'll zoom it up nice and big so it fills this window, and then I'll go to alpha, and under alpha we have this grab doc, and that'll essentially turn any image into an alpha. So if I hit grab doc, you'll see that it's made this alphaed image, and if we go back to our mesh, zoom out, I've still got solo on so I can't see the text, but if I hold down Control and set this to drag rect, so from wherever it was to the drag rect option, that's going to allow us to draw this out as a rectangle. We also want to set our focal shift to -100, and that should give us a clean mask. Make sure you're in draw mode, and if I draw from the middle, I can draw out that alpha we just made. So you do have to kind of start from the right spot, which is. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and that'll help get this part a little bit more to the right. No. Almost there. Probably. No, that won't do it. Cool, so that's put in a mask. So if I invert that mask by pressing Control Alt and clicking over here, zoom in a little bit, and if we go to our move, so move over here, and if I want to just redraw that pivot from here, I can just hold down the Alt key and draw on a flat surface, and it will draw out a straight line. I'll hold down Shift, and that will give me a new pivot point that I can see, so that's useful. Instead of using the move to pull in, which I could do, and that would cut into the shape, I could also go to deformation, and in there we've got an inflate, and I can drag to the right on this, and it'll also pull it in a little bit. So I probably want to go in 8, and I'll get rid of the mask, and you can see it's cut all of that text into our stone. It's probably cut it all a bit clean and even for me, so I'm going to undo it like there. And you can see I've also added the mask to the back, so it's gone right through the model to the back, which I didn't want to do. I could have avoided that by using either a turn off the back face mask, which you can do by going to Brush, pull that up, back face mask, which is under auto masking. I could turn that on and it will stop me drawing through the model. It's a button I use quite a lot and it's quite hidden, so it's under Brush, auto masking, back face mask. This is a kind of button I would either set to a hotkey or move to my shelf, which we'll have a look at in a later class. But for now, I'm just going to get rid of that mask by adding to my mask. So I'll go to like a side view, hold down Control, turn off the alpha, and just draw a rectangle over there, and that's just added to the mask. So I've left the front alone, I just masked over this side. So it got rid of the text from that side. I also want to get rid of some of it from here as well, so it's not quite so clean and even. I can do that by holding down Control, and we'll change this alpha to maybe one of the ones that already exist, like alpha 08. And I can just hold down Control, go to my draw, and draw this mask out big like this, and it's just going to kind of put a cloud over the top of some of it, get rid of some of the text, and a lot of it will just look a little bit worn away, especially when we start adding things like rock noise to it. I don't really want to be able to make out many of the words on here, mostly because it's all just random stuff. So just drawn out a bunch of extra masks, so I've had Control held down the whole time, and now if I go to that deformation and deflate by -8, and then I'll get rid of the mask, and there's still a bit more cutting. I might undo that and still add a bit more to this mask. It has an intensity, so when I hold down Control I get a different intensity. I could maybe play around with that a bit. I actually have it very low. Well, mainly want to smudge up this text a bit. Maybe around here. Cool. I'll try and deflate that by -8. Okay, it's starting to look a little bit less visible. I'll just turn my perspective back on. And that'll look worn away. When we start adding some stone and rock damage to it, it'll look a lot more natural. Might just add a little bit more to down here, just because I really want the edges to be worn. What is there? Okay, -8 again. Okay, also my cross has got a little bit chewed up at some point, maybe when I was remeshing it earlier on. I could always fix that by, because it has its own poly group, I could just isolate that group, so Control Shift, click on it, and go to my move, or actually I'll just use, well yeah, no, we'll use the move, hold down Alt, drag on the middle of the cross, and move it out just a little bit, and hold down Control Shift to bring it back. Maybe I can flatten that a little bit by isolating it again. Oops. And making sure I scale there, and it will just flatten that piece. It's got a bit of a chewed up edge. I'm going to damage quite a lot of this stuff, but I do want it to have the right pattern. So that's got most of the base shape done. I guess next we've got to add this additional pattern and start to damage this up a bit more. And we're going to add the ivy onto it as well. And we're going to do that in kind of part 2 of this video. I guess it's kind of a long video for one, so I'll do another sitting and get the rest of that detail done.